So you're driving home from work and you see these sketchy ass storefronts with neon signs like cash now. You're thinking, damn, who the hell falls for this? Right before you hit a pole, and now you need $500 by tomorrow or you can't get to work. But you already spent your whole paycheck and your credit score, yeah, let's not talk about that. But don't worry, because that sketchy storefront that you just clowned, that's about to be your best friend. Now look, payday loan stores used to be everywhere, 20,000 across America and more than McDonald's at one point, and they charged 400% annual interest and trapped millions who couldn't get traditional bank loans. But after regulations shut most of them down by 2020, you think the problem was solved. Instead, something worse happened. The industry didn't really die, it just innovated. Now it's apps like EarnIn, Klarna, and Dave offering early access to your paycheck or to buy now, pay later. Where with a tap of a finger, you now have access to loan sharks that make money off of keeping you in a cycle of debt. And in this cat and mouse game, guess who keeps winning? So what I found after diving deeper is a business model that's rebranded debt as empowerment. And if regulation doesn't catch up soon, an entire generation will spend their entire lives renting their own money. And their whole bet depends on you staying broke and desperate.
It's your own money, just earlier.
One of them has 400% and the worst one has 690% APR, 40 payments.
76% of payday loans are used to pay off previous ones, a revolving door of debt.
So to understand how we got from sketchy stores to sleek apps, you need to understand one thing. None of this is new. And the reason is simple. As long as people are desperate, someone will profit from it. Because as we're seeing today, 37% of Americans can't even afford to cover a $400 emergency without taking on debt. And it's getting worse. Wages haven't kept up with inflation, housing, groceries, everything has skyrocketed. But it's not like this trajectory has changed since the 90s. Which is exactly why payday loan stores were booming until around the mid-2000s. And they knew where to set up. They set up in working class neighborhoods and low-income communities, not because they were Robin Hood for people in the hood, but because desperate people make the best repeat customers. And here's how they made money. When you sign up for a payday loan, you borrow against your next paycheck and you pay it back with a small fee on payday. Sounds fair and actually even useful in an emergency scenario, right? Well, except payday loan stores didn't grow by serving one and done emergencies. 3/4 of the revenue came from people who took out 10 or more loans per year. 40% of borrowers took a new loan the same day they paid back the last one, and 24% of them reborrowed within the same week. And at annual percentage rates of 400%, you can see why this business model was actually set up to get desperate people in the door with a lifeline and then sell them on a subscription of debt. And that's how there was more stores than McDonald's at one point, and by the 2010s, the industry became too big to ignore. And so the regulators finally stepped in, or at least that was the idea. In 2010, and combined with the 2008 financial crash, the government created the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, or CFPB, to protect Americans from financial exploitation. And in 2017, the CFPB unveiled new rules to target payday lending. Lenders had to now verify that borrowers could actually repay before issuing a loan, and they'd be limited in how many times they could hit a customer's bank account after a failed payment. But as you can imagine, the industry fought back. Lobbyists sued and Congress tried to push back. And by 2020, under a new administration, the CFPB revoked the key rule about verifying if borrowers could actually repay, and regulation was instead passed down to each individual state. And to their credit, some states actually stepped up. Over 20 states capped interest at 36% APR, and Illinois even banned payday lending in 2021 entirely. But here's the weird part. Despite regulation, in some states, the industry actually grew. States like Texas without strict rate caps became safe havens. And as payday lending shifted online, all lenders in neighboring states had to do was incorporate in Texas and target borrowers in surrounding states with the same 400% high rates. But remember, this only works because the people who they're targeting aren't reading the fine print or comparison shopping because they need the cash fast. But nonetheless, by 2021, payday loan usage has dropped by half and thousands of stores closed, and it looked like regulation won. But here's the thing, people's desperation for cash didn't go away. If anything, like we talked about it got worse. So the industry didn't disappear, it just found new backers with deeper pockets. Because remember, Erden, Klarna, and Dave, they didn't just come from nowhere. They learned from the regulation, and as we're seeing now, they came back even more dangerous. And what's also dangerous is how today, it feels like every news outlet has a side. You scroll long enough and it's either outrage or opinion disguised as fact. And that's exactly why I've been using our sponsor, Straight Arrow News. SAN delivers news the way it should be. Clear, balanced, and without spin, and you get the facts, context, and multiple perspectives on so many stories so you actually understand what's going on instead of just reacting to it. With SAN, you can watch what matters to you when you want with your own personalized queue, and it's available on both the app and redesigned website. So if you're tired of drama and headlines built to divide, check out Straight Arrow News and finally get the full picture. So go to san.com/gen or scan this QR code here and start getting better news today. And now back to the video. So who are these new backers with deeper pockets? And how do they strategically pour billions into rebuilding the entire payday loan industry from the ground up? There's a few players, but let's start with the usual suspects, private equity. Private equity firms have been circling the payday lending world for years, but over the last decade, their influence exploded. Even as physical payday loan stores kind of declined, by 2017, private equity firms owned more than 5,000 of these stores across the US. Firms like Diamond Castle and Golden Gate Capital bought up multiple lenders and rolled them into national empires like Community Choice Financial with nearly 500 locations. If you've been following the channel, it's the same strategy they use in healthcare and housing: buy it, consolidate it, and then extract it for profit. But as the popularity was declining, they soon realized that physical stores were just step one. And what they realized quickly was that the real money was online. And that's where the second player has stepped in: venture capital. Now, unlike private equity, venture capital firms have a slightly different playbook. They don't just buy like existing established businesses, they fund startups and try and scale them fast. So surprisingly, quick profit actually isn't their first priority. Instead, their strategy is more so to capture market share, get millions of users hooked, gather their data, and then make their service worse and more expensive to profit more later. Sounds pretty familiar, right? And lately, VCs have started pouring billions into companies offering short-term credit, specifically buy now, pay later. You know the pitch. Enjoy this burger now so you can split this payment into 4 easy interest-free installments that you can pay later. And that's not even a joke, by the way. Some people are literally using it for that purpose. But anyways, VC investor strategy with companies like Affirm, Klarna, Afterpay, and Sezzle has paid off, where by 2022, 1 in 5 US adults have now used buy now, pay later. But here's the thing, they weren't just attracting low-income users anymore. Through their strategy, what started as like a low-income lifeline soon spread to Gen Z and millennials, so younger demographics, and even middle and high-income users, where 1/3 of their users earn 6 figures. So just in a few years, short-term debt has become normalized across income levels, but that's just the beginning. Because the real expansion happened when VCs figured out how to integrate this model directly into your paycheck.
Did you go to work today? Probably. Did you get paid for the work you did today? Probably not. You won't see that money till Friday, right?
Picture this, it's mid-month, you're broke, but you already worked 2 full weeks and you want your limited edition purple Labubu or bet on the big game. So why wait for payday? It's my money and I want it now. Well, that's exactly the pitch behind earned wage access. Major employers like Walmart and fast food chains have now partnered with these services to let workers access their wages early for a small fee, of course. But remember, with the help of these VC funds, they've also learned from the mistakes of the past. Because the real genius here is that they didn't pitch these earned wage access services to companies and their employees as a loan, but instead called it an employee benefit. And as I'll get into later, it also became a benefit for earned wage access companies too. But nonetheless, it worked, because by 2022, the average user accessed wages early 27 times a year, and half used it monthly. And just like that, with the snap of a finger, payday lending has gone mainstream again. And once banks and payroll processors and other businesses started investing in buy now, pay later and earned wage access, they both became so embedded in the system that regulating it became nearly impossible. So with billions in funding from private equity and venture capital, this modern form of payday lending didn't just scale their profits, but it scaled beyond regulation. and in the process made the cat and mouse game so irrelevant where by the time regulators figured it out, they've already moved on to the next loophole. And now they're not just exploiting ways to avoid regulation, but figuring out how to change how we fundamentally view debt. Because now that they have users hooked, they need to figure out how to make money. And what they realize is that when you can convince an entire generation that being broke and borrowing is financial freedom, you found an infinite money glitch. And how they did it was starting with convenience. Because obviously, why go to a sketchy storefront when you can get a loan as easy as ordering DoorDash while taking a shit? But once they nailed down the convenience, they knew that wasn't enough. They had to change how it was sold. Because think about it. You feel insane taking out a loan for junk food and video games, right? But what if it wasn't a loan, it was taking control of your money? And what if buying Chipotle in 4 installments wasn't desperation, it was optimizing cash flow? See, suddenly the decision doesn't feel so crazy. And that's exactly why they replace words like loans, interest, and credit damage with empowerment, freedom, and control.
Cost of living has skyrocketed across the country.
2/3 of Americans live paycheck to paycheck.
Paycheck to paycheck.
Paycheck to paycheck.
Because once you can do that, people stop seeing the trap. And when enough people believe it, that's when culture shifts. Unlike boomers who avoided debt, Gen Z and millennials see debt management now as a normal thing and even as a skill. And with national debt at record heights, I think it's fair to say that as a country, we've normalized it too. Because what may shock you though is that more and more buy now, pay later users aren't just using it to buy brand new sneakers. They're actually stacking loans across multiple apps just to pay for groceries and healthcare. Because for older generations and when the economy is good, calling debt as empowerment would sound crazy. But in a reality now where 2/3 of Americans live paycheck to paycheck, buy now, pay later positioning themselves as financial empowerment actually has made sense to people. So what's important to remember here is that the messaging doesn't just work because most people are financially stupid, but for some, it's because they have no choice in a system where being broke has been turned into a profit center. And so now when the culture demands it and the economy requires it, these companies have built themselves a shield where they become immune to regulation. Because now it's not just the industry that's fighting back, it's the users that's defending it. In 2024, the CFPB announced that buy now, pay later services would be and should be treated like credit cards with real disclosures and actual rules. But even with those threats, buy now, pay later just kept expanding online, in store, travel, healthcare, because people were using it. And when regulators turned their attention to earned wage access, the industry was already 2 steps ahead. In 2023, the CFPB alleged that earned wage access programs that charge fees should also be treated as credit, but earned wage access quickly found a loophole with tips. These apps now claim that they're free, but with an optional tip. Except if you don't tip, you might not get instant access, or the app might limit how much you can borrow next time. Since a $5 instant fee or a suggested $3 tip here is all voluntary, they argue that it's not interest and just a tip. So even in late 2024, when the Attorney General sued EarnIn, alleging that its earned wage access service was violating usury laws, EarnIn had the perfect response. They argue that they're not predatory lenders, but they're responsible innovators offering a lifeline to customers who have no choice. And they argue that earned wage access empowers individuals to make financial decisions for their unique situations. And when now more than 20 million Americans use these apps regularly, it's kind of hard to argue that. So the case is still ongoing, but the pattern is clear. When you shift culture and position yourself as the only lifeline for people with no choice, you don't even need to fight regulators anymore. Your users will do it for you. So it's not even a cat and mouse game anymore. It's a game where the mouse convinces the cheese to defend the trap. So where does this all lead? Because as more people become dependent on these apps, we're not just normalizing debt, we're building an economy that requires it.
So I'm broke, but I'm not broke.
Back in the day, going into a payday loan store meant poverty, desperation, and frankly, shame. And today, these same practices are marketed as empowerment, self-expression, and financial freedom. And just like how we've seen the last few years and how quickly the cultural zeitgeist can shift, we've gone from hiding debt to celebrating it. So there's a good chance that as you're watching this video, you might be thinking, this doesn't apply to me, it's only for the financially stupid. But here's the reality, because as the economy worsens, as AI takes your job, as housing becomes unaffordable, more and more people will have no choice. And not to mention when defaults start mounting like student loans, car loans, mortgages, and now paycheck advances, just like I talk about in a lot of my videos, it won't just hurt the people borrowing, it will crash the system for everyone. Maybe that's part of the design, because when your life is a never-ending emergency, you're easier to control. And nothing is easier to exploit than the good little consumer that buys now, thinks later. But the good news is, if you watched until the end, I would never want that to happen to you. So if you want to join the thousands who are learning how money and power works just in 5 minutes, each and every single week, then go check it out in my video description. But if you haven't seen my last video on how prediction markets are directly breaking political outcomes, go and watch this video next and like this video. Thanks.